Let's jump in now and get started. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of Zoomdata. We were founded in 2012 by some industry experts in business intelligence who realized there was a significant change in the way big data and fast data and the variety of data was changing the way analytics needs to be delivered in the market. Our product has been shipping for about a year now, and already more than 30 customers have embraced our technology and deployed in a variety of industries and a variety of use cases. And we'll dig into some of that today. One of the things that we're doing at Zoomdata is optimizing our technology specifically to take advantage of all the modern data platforms that are emerging in the market today. So we're working very closely with the leaders in Hadoop and other big data and Spark environments like Cloudera, Hortonworks, Databricks, and others. And we'll showcase today in the demos how we can deliver optimized analytics that take advantage of the incredible processing power of some of those platforms. And fortunately, the company is backed by world-class investors who understand the transformative capabilities of big data analytics. Investors such as Accel and NEA, who are funding our growth. We're now over 90 employees in 5 offices in the US and Europe. The reason why we decided to start Zoomdata was because we saw 3 incredibly disruptive trends impacting the analytics market. Not only that big data in the form of Hadoop and other big data architectures was starting to really drive the market, but it's also that beyond the increasing volume of data, the variety of data, whether that's NoSQL, semi-structured, unstructured, search, and real-time, was really changing the landscape of the variety of data that organizations needed to deal with. And also, the velocity of that is changing the way IT organizations are trying to think about managing the architecture for deploying applications, and increasingly being impacted by the need for streaming architectures to adapt to the high velocity of data impacting their organizations. At the same time, user expectations are changing. We see the consumerization of the enterprise driving the need for much more easy-to-use interfaces to advanced analytics that can be deployed both on the web and on mobile devices, kind of a zero training paradigm where traditional tools can no longer really serve that function. And meanwhile, the modern enterprise is grappling with evolving architectures where organizations need to be able to deploy solutions dynamically in both on-premise and in public and private cloud scenarios. There are hybrid cloud and on-prem deployment requirements, and organizations are increasingly looking at sort of containerized software that they can elastically scale up and down and manage in a dynamic IT environment. So all 3 of these disruptive trends have really changed the requirements for how a business analytics tool should be architected and delivered. And unfortunately, the current set of BI tools and the legacy tools are just not ready and capable to deal with those things. Most of them are quite hard to use, really designed for Excel power users, where business analysts who receive specialized training were able to use complicated workbench interfaces to develop reports and dashboards that might be then shared across an organization. But really, self-service BI was quite difficult to deploy broadly in the community. At the same time, these solutions were not able to scale in this emerging modern data architecture. You've got desktop or monolithic server-based BI tools that are limited by the amount of data that they could manage in memory or in proprietary data stores. And these monolithic applications could not be integrated or embedded into other applications to deliver contextual analytics. And finally, the performance is just slow. Users have an expectation of sub-second or very rapid response time, and In today's big data world, that's very hard to deliver unless you have a highly optimized technology, especially when most products still use 30-year-old OVC connection methodologies to try to connect to modern data architecture. So we started Zoomdata with a new approach and three critical design criteria: that the product should be responsive so that it can be interactive, visual, and delivered for business users so that you can have contextual analytics where you can literally touch and interact and explore your data versus writing queries and code. And most importantly, to allow that to happen in a real-time fashion so that data is constantly updated for users when and where they need it. And that means you also need to have an agile architecture that can be delivered in a hybrid cloud or on-prem approach, that can be deployed in a multi-tenant environment, that could be managed through technologies that could scale the applications elastically as required, and that they could be integrated and extended to meet the needs of specific use cases and applications. And finally, a solution that has to be blazingly fast. So you can be parallel process, multi-framework, and the ability to take advantage of the underlying speed and power of these new modern data stores. And the result of that is what we've been able to deliver with Zoomdata. And so what we'd like to do today is showcase that for you. We're going to describe a couple of actual customer use cases, improvement in quoting efficiency by their reps. It was such a fantastic impact on their business performance that at the Strata conference in New York in September, they were the winner of the Data Impact Award for analytics performance. And after the webcast, we can make available links to some articles and research about what they're doing. But what I'd like to do now is introduce Russ Cosentino, who's going to go into the Zoomdata environment and show you how you can take advantage of this kind of real-time analytic capability.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Thanks for that introduction. And I'm Russ Cosentino with Zoomdata and Head Up Channels. I'm jumping into Zoomdata and going to take a demo through how we connect to data and show some real-time and big data in Zoomdata, and then follow up with some additional demonstrations and overview of the technology. So as a user, when we come in, we want to always connect to data. And this is the foundation of the application, is the pre-built connectors that Zoomdata has built for all these modern databases. We make it really easy to optimize the connection and visualization of your data in one of these sources by simply clicking on a link here and going through the steps to connect to that data set. So here we put in our credentials, and then we basically enter in a JDBC URL here. What this does is it identifies and connects us to the data set so that we can begin to visualize that data. Now, you have here a list of all the tables that are available in the Impala cluster. And from here, I can preview this particular data set. Once I've selected that data set, the next thing I do is look at the field IDs, and I may choose to relabel them. I can change the attribute type to money, integer, and numeric. And then the last thing in this process is to associate visualizations to these particular data sources. So with Zoomdata, we see a data source that might sit in Impala. We go ahead and configure that connection to that data source, and then we activate visualizations for that data source. So here we have a bar chart, and I can say when I want this to start up, I might want it to start up on user gender or user city or some other attribute. Now with Zoomdata, we don't limit our users only to our pre-built visualizations, but we also have a chart studio. And in the chart studio, you can build your own custom visualizations and turn those visualizations onto a particular data source. And at the Zoomdata YouTube channel, there are lots of lots of videos on how to create a visualization in Zoomdata. So now let's see how we take advantage of data sitting in Zoomdata. So I'm going to open up a data source, and it's called real-time sales. And this data source is designed to emulate a department store. And it's showing data in real time. So as data comes into the into the system, it's immediately visualized for the user. So that's why these bars continue to change. But I want you to focus here on the bottom, and this is our data DVR. And with our data DVR, we're basically able to seamlessly transition between real-time data and a historical time period. And I can just pause this and look at a particular point in time. Or I can maybe switch this and look at a minute per second, or go to an hour per second, or go to a day per second. And ultimately, I can slide it all the way to the right, and I snap back into looking at the data in real time. So think about what we just did with this application is we did a seamless transition between real time and historical. It made it pretty easy for the user in that we don't require any programming to make this happen. Now with any BI tool, we want to make sure we have some functions that include an export capability, where I can export raw data, I can export data into Excel, create screenshots in PDFs or PNGs. I can also add in things like reference lines or change my axis values. I can also apply filters. So say I want to go ahead and apply a filter that excludes all the states that begin with the letter C. I go ahead and hit apply, and it's that easy. And I am basically having now a real-time interaction with the data. As the data comes in, I'm able to make and modify my views of the information. Now, let's go ahead and do some analysis and zoom in on accessories. When I zoom in on accessories, maybe I want to look at this by SKU. And here I am looking at my filters, where I have states and accessories highlighted here, but I can see I'm only looking at about 15 records. And I think the reason is that my time bar is set for a very short period of time. So if I extend this, now you can see the records increase because I've expanded my time window. I can also change my chart type. Maybe I want to change this to a donut chart, or I can start adding in other visualizations. Maybe I want to add in floating bubbles and potentially add in a map of the US. And what's really cool here with Zoomdata is we make it easy to do cross-visual filtering. So if I wanted to filter mail books against all the different data sources, say the donut chart, I go ahead and apply filter, and it will update this visualization based on that particular filter. So what's happened now is I've built a dashboard, and I'm able to save that dashboard by just clicking Save Favorites, and I can share it with other folks. I take this URL and copy it, and I can paste it in another website or email to someone, and then they'll get access to the information. Now, Zoomdata not only works great for real-time sales, it also works great for big data sets. So here we have 1 billion rows of data sitting in an Impala Cloudera cluster. And we have a really great partnership with the Cloudera team and have optimized our connections for that particular data source. So I'm going to just kick off an analysis of the data. I'm just going to exclude a couple of SKUs. Go ahead and hit apply. Now what I want you to do is look at the top left-hand corner. You see it's reading. So what's happening is that the Zoomdata server is kicking off a query of the Cloudera Impala cluster. And I want you to notice here, you can see as I hover over California, the numbers, the counts are updating. And what it's doing is running an updated query, but we just went through 1 billion rows of data in a matter of seconds. So this is huge for companies that want to do an analysis of information but don't want to have queries that take for hours. They can go into the data immediately and get a sense of what's showing up. In fact, notice how I went into the state, and again, within seconds, I already had an assessment that Wichita probably had a lot of volume in it. And I don't even have to wait for that query to run to completion. I can even deep dive again into this zip code and look at the data. So imagine that if you're an analyst, being able to churn through all this data in seconds and not have to wait for queries to run to completion. And in fact, that brings up a great use case that we have at Zoomdata, and that's our customer AbbVie. So AbbVie has access to a data set called Truven Health, and it manages over 9 billion health records. And within AbbVie, there's clinicians that go ahead and leverage that data set to identify candidates for potential clinical trials. Now, the old way of doing it was to load it into a traditional SQL RDBMS database and run queries against that. But those queries would take about 6 hours to run. And if you're a scientist trying to identify users for these trials, every time you run that query, you're talking about weeks or months to identify candidates for these results. What we did at Zoomdata is we loaded that data into Cloudera Impala, and we changed the game for them. So instead of waiting hours for queries to return, they now wait 6 seconds for those queries to return. So the user is able to dive into the data, get the results they need, and identify those candidates for clinical trials in a matter of days, not in a matter of weeks or months. So let's talk a little bit more about the application of Zoomdata. And there really are a couple of key selling points within Zoomdata that set us apart from a lot of players in the marketplace. First and foremost, it's built for big data. We have the advantage of starting a couple of years ago and realized that big data is really taking a new way of being stored in the enterprise. And what we've done is built our application around big data stores. And when we say big data stores, we're talking about customers that not only have data in the gigabytes, but the terabytes and even petabyte volumes. And customers that want to visualize all that data, not just sample that data. And to do that, we need to be built for speed. And I'll highlight in a second how we leverage microqueries to deliver results against those big data sets in a short period of time. At Zoomdata 2, we've also been inspired by Google and Apple and wanted to build a user interface that's for the broadest range of users. What we didn't want to do is have a user interface that required 6 hours of training and was only designed for data scientists and data analysts. We want to expand the usage window to as many people as possible. And ultimately, we like to think of the application as a modern distributed application. It's built for scale, it's built for the enterprise. So it begins with the data sources, and highlighted in the demo, Zoomdata has all these pre-built connectors in the application. Things like Impala and Hive and Spark and Mongo and MemSQL, all super powerful, super fast databases. And what Zoomdata did is build connectors to all these different data sources with the realization that people want to have connectors that are optimized for those different data sources. So when we look at something like search, we're able to take advantage of unstructured text search. We're able to take advantage of facets and nesting. When we look at something like Cloud Impala, we're able to take advantage of microqueries. So each one of these connectors has attributes that are designed to optimize against where our customers want to store their data. So what we don't do is say, oh, your data has to sit in SQL. You can put your data in the environment that makes the most sense for your business, and then we'll help take advantage of the performance characteristics of that database within the Zoomdata application. The next thing that we've done is we've patented data sharpening. And with data sharpening, you already saw an example of this when we were showing the 1 billion rows of data. And that's the concept where if I'm having a data interaction with the data, say I want to do some visualization or filtering, every time I push a button on Zoomdata, it goes ahead and it clicks off a query against the cluster in Zoomdata. So little microqueries are bursted against all the nodes in that cluster. And as each node does its job, it sends the results back to the Zoomdata server, and the Zoomdata server begins to assemble. So that's why these pictures start out a little blurry, but in a matter of seconds, you see the completed visualization. And this is important to emphasize is that we're not sampling data. So if you're looking at petabytes, terabytes, gigabytes of data, we're not just calling on a sample of the information, we're exposing the results for the entire query, and we're doing it all in a matter of seconds. And finally, we like to think of the application as a modern distributed architecture. So customers are able to connect or load all their data in these data sources. And what's important to note is that we don't ask our customers to basically store the data in one repository environment and then move a copy of it into a proprietary data environment managed by, say, the Zoomdata server with some sort of proprietary schema. We've built our smart connectors to connect and show results from these sources as opposed to having a movement of data in your enterprise. Security and administration services are also incredibly important to us, so we support LDAP, SAML, single sign-on, Kerberos, and then we have our visualization service, which delivers all of our visualizations in JavaScript. They're based on HTML5, and when you think of this architecture, basically we deploy the Zoomdata server, we deploy it on-premise or in the cloud. This Zoomdata server connects to the sources, and then it visualizes the data for the business user. What it doesn't do, and this is great from a security standpoint, is it doesn't take this data sitting in, say, HDFS and move a copy of it to the Zoomdata server and then cache results here on the user's interface. So the security benefits are enormous for the enterprise because we're keeping the data where it sits as opposed to moving the data to the user's environment. There's also additional capabilities within Zoomdata that has to deal with Spark. So with Spark, we support detailed analytics, we support the fusion of data, and we also support results caching within the application. So let's talk a little bit more about fusion. And when we think of the enterprise and we think of users that deploy Zoomdata, we realize that all this data is showing up in all these different sources, that people don't want to, say, load all their data into a common repository. They want to keep the data where it sits, but they want to be able to access lookups from other different tables and merge them into a single view of the data. And that's where Zoomdata Fusion comes in. Within this feature, within Zoomdata, it's bundled within our Zoomdata server, we're able to combine metrics from all these big data sources, and we're able to enrich lookups into that data into a single source for the user. And we'll show that in the upcoming demo in a moment. The other thing that's important to us as well has to do with the cloud. So we're seeing in our market a lot of big data projects are starting to move to the cloud. People are looking at the cloud as a complement to their on-premise deployments. A lot of new projects are starting up in the cloud. Sometimes they don't want to move data out of the premise, and sometimes they do. But we see that as being a part of the overall enterprise deployment. And with Zoomdata's architecture, we're able to analyze the data where it exists, not the other way around. So what we're not doing is moving the data. So when you think about it, if you have your data sitting on premise and in the cloud, you can have one Zoomdata server connecting to all your data across the enterprise. And let's look at the history here. We had our first wave of cloud BI solutions that really weren't focused on big data. And we'd probably put the Tableaus in this particular category. And we've had the next generation of the SaaS BI solutions that really require moving data to the cloud. That's what we're talking about, the bursts and the domos. And the issue there is that they're really not scalable for big data deployments. You can't really forklift a terabyte of data or petabytes of data into these systems in real time. You want that data to stay where it is and expose it where it sits. And what also happens is you lock yourself into a single vendor too. What we realize at Zoomdata is that we have our strengths around the business user, but sometimes there's other tools that you may want to leverage in addition to Zoomdata to solve specific problems. And when you use the cloud-based BI tools, you're kind of locking into the features that that provider provides, as opposed to having options, which are probably important for the enterprise. And then we have the legacy BI solutions, the ones that really were started 10, 20 years ago. They weren't really architected for the cloud, really weren't architected for big data. They do a great job in certain areas, but when you're looking to deploy in the cloud, Zoomdata has a solution for it. And in fact, when you think about our current AnyCloud initiative, so we're able to deploy Zoomdata servers on the cloud or on-premise. We have one-click deployments with these providers. It also eliminates the movement of data into redundant data repositories. And again, what we're highlighting here is that if your data is sitting in Azure or CenturyLink or Google Cloud or Amazon or IBM, we're not saying you need to move the data. We're saying just keep adding to your data where it sits, just let Zoomdata to connect, stream, and visualize that data. The other thing that's important to highlight is when you deploy Zoomdata, it really is built as a modern distributed application. So we support multi-tenant and microservices architecture. We scale out in commodity hardware. So when we use these cloud deployments, it's just simple to add in additional servers. What happens is the number of users increase with the Zoomdata server. That basically means you just have to add in more Zoomdata servers into your deployment, and you load balance the front end. Now we also support Spark, and we can provide more details on our Spark integration, but sometimes the Spark cluster can be within the Zoomdata server, or it can be an external Spark cluster. And of course, we also support the use of data sources across the enterprise as well. I think I just want to highlight is that we're starting to do a lot of work with ISVs and solution providers. They see big data in the cloud as a big opportunity, and at Zoomdata, we do have a reseller program that helps our partners deploy big data visual analytics. I just want to spend a moment also talking about our partnership with Microsoft Azure. So with Microsoft Azure, we are able to support one-click deployments in the cloud. And so basically, if you go in and search on Zoomdata, you're able to spin up a Zoomdata server in a matter of minutes, and then you're able to instantly connect to HD Insights, Cloudera, Hortonworks, or Spark deployments, or traditional sources like SQL. And we're also working with Azure partners because this is a great way for them to help their customers that once they have made the deployment with Cloudera or HD Insights to then put a visualization front end onto the data source. So let me jump to another part of the demo, and I'm going to start by looking at Microsoft. So here we are logged into the Microsoft Azure portal, and I have the marketplace here, and I can just type in Zoomdata, and I'll get a list of the Zoomdata products that are sitting in Azure, all with a one-click deployment. Now we have three different types. We have our bring your own license, which basically means that you can set up a Zoomdata server, but you contact the Zoomdata team to activate your Zoomdata instance. We have a trial, which is free for 30 days. And we definitely encourage you to do this, is to download the Zoomdata server in Microsoft Azure, spin up a connection, and test it out for free for 30 days. And then you can also buy the production instance where you can buy Zoomdata with the license immediately and put it into production. Once you go ahead and select one of these, you come through the process of creating a connection. You go ahead and finish your base configuration and go through the steps of choosing your machines, configuring your options, and then you hit buy, and then your Zoomdata server is set up. So we have one that's already set up here called Zoomdata HDI. And here I have my IP address for getting into that particular server. In fact, if I come here, I'm logged into that box. ahead and click on the login. What I want to highlight is that we've already built a connection here within HD Insights. And here's an HD Insights sample. We have our connection, our JDBC URI. This is data sitting in HD Insights. We're able to see all the views of the data and activate charts for that visualization. So that when I look at the dashboard we've created, there's HD Insights. And again, I can add in other charts, other visualizations. And if you are working on a deployment where you have data sitting in the cloud, it's that simple to activate a Zoomdata instance and then configure the connector and show the information immediately. So now let's jump into another demo. This is really an exciting capability within Zoomdata, and this is Zoomdata Fusion. So think of this. Think of your company, and you've got all your different data sources deployed in all these different data environments. And you do that simply because each one of these environments have certain characteristics that are optimized for your data set. And what you don't want to have to do is to call your engineers and say, all right, I want to maybe move this piece of data and that piece of data into some sort of new query so I can run a standard report. With Zoomdata, what we do is leverage data fusion that allows you to bring that data together into a single view of the truth without having to move the data. So imagine you're Ticketmaster, and within Ticketmaster, you have data sitting in all these different data sources. I have some data sitting in Mongo, in MySQL, in S3, and in Cloudera and Impala. And I could add other data sources here too by just clicking on these buttons. But what's important to notice here too is that Zoomdata knows that Mongo and MySQL and Cloudera are super fast data sets. But what it also realizes is that S3 is not the most performant querying engine in the world. So what it does is it moves a copy of that data into its internal Spark connection. And ultimately, it levels the playing field so that we're able to have that response, as we highlighted in the real-time sales demo, across all these different data sources, but in one single view of the truth. Now, after I've gone ahead and selected these data sets, I come into the editor, and I can begin to drag and drop attributes into this file. It's just a matter of dragging them over here. When I'm done, I go ahead and hit the next button. Oops. I don't want to overwrite someone else's work, so I'm just going to cancel and go back into that again. And when we come in here and look at now are the fields. So here we have the list ID, the seller ID, the event information. These are all new fields that we've created within the data. And here within the ID, I have the event information, and these are all integers or numeric fields. So these are numeric descriptors of actual events. What I also have is an attribute, which is actually a text description of these events that I can look at as well. And once I've completed this particular build of the table, I have my charts, and I can go ahead and configure my charts for that particular visualization or source. So what's this look like? Well, let's go ahead and open up a dashboard. And this is our Fusion dashboard. So this is looking at that data source that basically pulled the data from those 4 different data sources. But before we start analyzing it, I want to just highlight the old way of looking at data and then the new way. So we have this data sitting in S3, and this is the data that we're actually moving into the internal Spark instance into Zoomdata so that we can do our analysis. And I'm just going to zoom in here and show you a list of all the attributes that are available. You can see it's a limited list because this is just looking at that one file sitting in S3, which is the seller's data. Now let's look at here. This is a new source that we created, and I zoom in here. Now look at all the attributes that are available to me. And in fact, seller state, which wasn't in the S3, shows up here in the ticket marketplace. And then this will update this chart to show all the distribution information based on seller state. Now let's just continue our analysis a little more. I'm going to turn this filter off, and I'm going to change the chart type to a table. Now this is a Zoomdata table. It's actually a pivot table on steroids. It's super powerful, regardless of whether or not you're looking at a small data set of, say, 383 million records, or a big data set with billions and billions of rows of data. I'm going to open up the configuration here. I'm just going to go ahead and start adding in a couple of groups. And notice as I add in category group and category name, and I take out seller information, the pivot table just keeps on updating. And I might want to move the category group here. You see how easy it is to modify this particular view of the data. Now, let's jump in here and let's look at the formulas. Now, any good analytics tool has to be pretty deep in analytics, and Zoomdata certainly is able to do that. So I'm pulling up our calculation studio. And in this calculation studio, I can create strings or calculations that can be applied to the data that's currently available in that data source for visualization. And here I have a calculation that's looking at the ticket sales, quantity sold, and this is data that's sitting in Cloudera and Power. And then here I have data sitting in Mongo, and this is the IDs, the number of tickets sold in Mongo. So in this particular view of the data, I'm dividing the number of tickets sold in Cloudera by the listings in Mongo. This calculation is being calculated against two different data sources in two different spaces. They could both be in Amazon, one could be in Amazon, one could be on-premise, one could be in Amazon, one could be in Azure. As long as we have access to the data, we can do this calculation on the fly. So I go ahead and click this button, and now we'll see that it's going to go ahead and run this calculation and add it to this particular chart. So I can do an export here, where I can export the raw data and put it in the cross tabs. I can do PDFs, I can do screenshots, and share this data with other folks in the organization. Now, two other things that I want to highlight are when users want to go ahead and do some co-branding within the application. And that process begins with the Chart Studio. And within the Chart Studio, I have all of our standard visualizations within Zoomdata, but I can also create custom visualizations here as well. And I do that by basically taking D3 code and pasting it into the editor and watching those changes persist here. And within here, I can go ahead and add libraries, and not just the D3 library, but say there's leaflet or MVD3. All these libraries are available for a user to leverage. And I can also put in controls that limit the features and functionality that the user sees. So I can go ahead and build these charts for data sources, and then I can decide whether or not I want to use the standard Zoomdata interface, or maybe I want to build a private labeled interface like we've done here for our partner Appian. Appian is a BPM product, business process management product. And in here, we have a dashboard that shows data between their system, as well as exposes their application in the Zoomdata dashboard as well. So think about it. These two systems are looking at the same data set. The Zoomdata set is doing visualizations, and the Appian system is allowing people to do a analysis of data in their system. The next thing that may happen is people may want to go a step further, and typically this happens later on in their deployments, that they want to use a JavaScript SDK, where they want to build a completely private labeled user experience for their customer base. And here, all we're doing is making calls into Zoomdata visualizations and watching those changes persist here. And every time I make a change, something updates in the dashboard, and I can actually see all the data as well. So those are the key points that I want to highlight. I'm going to turn it back over to Nick, and we'll jump into closing remarks.
Great, thank you, Russ. That's a fantastic set of examples of our capabilities. You know, here we looked at real-time analytics. We looked at analytics optimized for very big data running on billions of rows. We looked at the exciting new Zoomdata Fusion capability that was introduced in version 2. Zoomdata Fusion really is a transformative technology. Whether you want to do something as simple as just correlate, big data in Hadoop against a simple, lookup file on your laptop. You could have an Excel file with custom regions you want to do lookup against, or whether you want to do what a number of our customers do, which is sort of correlate big data with traditional data that might be sitting in a Oracle-based CRM application or some cloud data that might be sitting in Salesforce.com. So Fusion really changes the game in terms of allowing you to run analytics and even to perform calculations on the fly across multiple data sets. And there were some questions about that, Russ, on the panel, and I encourage you all to ask some more. So, for example, one of our attendees was thinking about the kind of performance they might get when they're looking at billions of rows on one fact table that has 35 columns. And this organization is currently using MicroStrategy on a Netezza backend, and it's taking them 40 seconds to get results. How would we look at solving that kind of a problem for a customer who's having performance issues on Netezza?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really that plays into how we're architected. So when we look at those types of opportunities, we see Impala as being a great partner of ours, Cloud Air Impala, which would basically load that data into that environment and run the queries against Netezza super fast, with the results being visualized through the Zoomdata. So there's no step between Netezza and Zoomdata where we're copying the data and formatting the data or ETLing the data in prep for MicroStrategy. We're running our queries directly off of Impala and completely dependent on the performance of Impala. In that one use case I had as a benchmark where we have the customer with 9 billion rows of data and the results come back in a matter of 6 to 10 seconds. And that uses the data sharpening to show those results immediately instead of waiting for the query to run the completion before you expose the information.
I think that aspect of the performance around data sharpening is really important for us because, a lot of times you don't need the full result set back in order to decide what your next step would be. You might realize you've made the wrong query or that the data is already showing where you need to drill down and explore further. So that ability to have, the fastest time to interaction is critical. So even if it takes maybe 6 seconds for the full query to render, you might have enough information within a second to be able to start to interact with it. It's really a lot more like the web model where you have this notion of time to first change and then time to first interaction. How quickly can you see it and then how quickly can you click on it?
And Nick, I would just add in, Nick, it also, if you're a manager, it gets rid of the coffee break where you're waiting for those queries to run to completion. You immediately know what's going on instead of waiting 5, 10, 20 minutes, an hour to see those results.
Well, I think that's critical to self-service BI and real business user data discovery because science shows that users will lose their focus if they can't interact within 1 or 2 seconds. And so that's critical to getting peak productivity out of the user and out of the application. There was another sort of question about configuration there. If you're running billions of rows, in Hadoop, is that in one table? Does it have to be in one table file, or could you have that in multiple tables and files?
It's typically in one view of the data, one wide, long table.
Is there any limit to the width of the table, or can you talk about some of the kinds of sizes that our customers are exploiting?
There isn't a limit, and I believe Impala can support pretty wide tables, but we don't see customers with tables, with thousands of columns. We see them with, tens, 20s, no more than hundreds of columns of data that they're looking at.
Okay, that's great. Hey, there was a couple of questions about calculations. A lot of people are interested in that ability to do calculations and especially across multiple data sets. So where are those calculations performed, and can you add multiple conditions into the calculation?
Yes, you can add in multiple conditions, but we are limited in all the functions that are available in the Zoomdata server. Our goal is to provide a broad range of functionality that hopefully one day is on par with something like R. But we continue to add in new features around calculating differences in time, standard deviation, max mins. Those features are available in the tool. And you can continue to create strings that leverage all those functions within the application. The calculations themselves happen within the Zoomdata server and within the Spark framework that comes with the server.
So if you did want to use some advanced statistical analysis like R, and given that we're running in Spark, is it possible to associate Spark with some of the statistical analysis capabilities that folks like Databricks are integrating?
There are some things that we can do, but usually what happens when people are looking at data sets that they want to create some R-level types of calculations is that they may pre-calculate data and then have Zoomdata do the visualizations on top of that.
And I think that's an important point. If you're a data scientist and you're doing some data calculations like that and you want to share them out to the community, it's pretty easy to do that visualization through Zoomdata, and then the user can go on to do additional data discovery beyond what has been provided by the data scientists. So that can really help with that interaction model between, your small group of data scientists and the much larger group of business folks who might want to be interacting with the results.
Yeah, absolutely.
A word about data prep. There are some questions about whether we, do data preparation and what's our perspective on that.
So we've got a lot of great partners in that space. Trifacta, Pixata, Informatica, Tamer come to mind. When it comes to data prep, we do look to those tools to really do the heavy lifting around data prep. Sometimes the data right out of Impala is perfect for us, but sometimes there might be some ETL work or some data prep work around getting the data into the data source, whether it's Impala or Search or Hive or wherever, and then we just connect to the data sitting there. But I think that's important to note is that that data prep level happens before it goes into the Impala database as opposed to happening after Impala and before Zoomdata.
Yeah, that's right. We give users the ability to do things in Data Fusion like reach out and access different sources and set up the join, but it presumes that the data is in pretty good shape beforehand. Otherwise, you would want to invest in one of those data prep tools. Great. Hey, the question of security came up. For example, what if you want to share information in some reports and, classic example where, a senior executive gets to see all regions of data, but people down in the organization, like sales directors or sales rep, might only get access to portions of the data. How would we do that?
Yeah, so we've spent a lot of time working with our enterprise customers. And again, these are banks and federal agencies where security is super important to them. And the situation that you described is very relevant for those departments that want to limit exposure to the data. To that end, we employ things like Cloudera Sentry, which provides row-level and cell-level access. In addition to our single sign-on and LDAP and SAML functionality, we are able to persist credentials into the Zoomdata server. And then finally, we have the ability to do security at the filtered level based on the concept of users and groups within the application so that we can limit features there as well. So just to highlight some of those, things like Cloudera Sentry provide cell level control at the database level. Things like LDAP and SAML can persist credentials between Zoomdata and those systems. And then we offer the security at the actual server level, the Zoomdata server level, at the user and group level.
Yeah, that's great, Russ. And I just point out that we do have a number of customers for whom this is a critical requirement. People doing customer 360, people in the financial services and banking communities, and other highly secure environments. And so that's a commitment on our side. We think that's part of supporting the modern data architecture is making sure that we can be managed by sophisticated data center management tools and integrated with cutting edge security models for maximum performance. If you're going to be distributing an application to potentially thousands of users, and we have a number of customers who are putting applications up on their public website, you need to double down on security. Hey, Russ, here's a question about performance in the cloud. So let's say you're deploying in Azure or Amazon AWS. What happens to the data latency, say the impact of reading a billion rows of data, or if you've got real-time information? What's the right way for customers to think about that?
Yeah, so the way to think about that is whether the big data data warehouse sits in the cloud or on-premise, it's always dependent on the hardware that it's running on and the connections there. It's always going to perform super fast. That latency might be outside the control of the actual database itself. Now, as it relates to real-time, those are great deployments that we have as well, where we have connections into real-time streams of data. And then what we'll do is we'll visualize that information as it comes into the Zoomdata server and then land a copy of that, say in Impala or Mongo or Spark or something like that, where we can show the results from the data DVR perspective. So we don't see any degradation in performance, whether data is sitting in the cloud or sitting on-premise, except for limitations in the hardware or the networking architecture that those environments are providing.
That's great. And there was a related cloud question, just specifically, are you available in the AWS marketplace? And right now we are delivering in AWS with our partner Cloudera, and very soon will be available in the marketplace. That we're just going through the process of doing that now. You can install and BYOL for AWS today, but I think in a couple of months, right, Russ, will be available through the marketplace.
Yep, we're really excited about that.
That's great. Here's some questions about our search support capabilities, specifically connecting to Elasticsearch. For example, does the Elasticsearch connector work over HTTPS, or does it use transport clients like the ES Java API?
I think for that one, Nick, I don't know the answer off the cuff, but maybe we find out who asked that and get back to them.
All right, we've got that question tracked in, and we'll follow up directly with the questioner. I just wanted to test how deeply your technical connector knowledge went. We're getting up towards the end of the hour, and we'll continue to answer questions. But as we do, here's a great question that almost could be a wrap-up for us. It would be, how would we share a couple of unique factors that differentiate us from other BI vendors? If you were going to pick the sort of top 3 or 4 things that separate us from, I don't know, say Tableau or MicroStrategy or QuickTech.
Yeah, and I think the points that we have here in the slide really define that. So one is big data. So typically when we're working with customers and they start a big data project, they will look at Tableau as a potential solution. But what they realize is Tableau is great for smaller data sets. It has a ton of features, and it's great for data analysts. But when you cross that chasm and you're looking at gigabytes or terabytes of data, the connectors that Tableau have in its architecture is not optimized for these big data deployments. So then they start working for us because of the ease in which they can connect, stream, and visualize data against those big data sets. The next thing is speed. We got rid of the cup of coffee break. We're able to show visualizations leveraging data sharpening in a matter of seconds. All the other tools do not have that data sharpening ability where we've patented that. And that means that you're waiting for that query to run to completion. We do show the complete query, and we're not sampling the data, we're showing all the data, which again is another differentiator between us and some of the other tools, is that they'll be dependent on sampling as opposed to looking at the data as it comes in. And finally, the broadest range of users. I think this is really important to us, and kind of it goes back to when we started the company. It is providing a tool that's built for everybody, not a tool that's limited to the data scientists or the data analysts, but that a business user and a data analyst can derive value from the tool. That's really important into how we design the application. And in fact, an interesting story is that one of our first designers at Zoomdata, his background was in designing record covers, not in designing enterprise applications. And his ideas on how a business user would interact with Zoomdata definitely influenced the design of the application. So we weren't limited to following that traditional enterprise big company view. We were able to create something from scratch that was really designed for that broadest range of users.
And I would add to that, if you look at our installed base, over 50% of our customers are deploying applications where Zoomdata is integrated into or actually embedded in an application. And increasingly, we see people are trying to deliver contextual analytics. So the user is interacting with the analytics in conjunction with whatever they're doing for their business function. And the ability to customize into those environments makes it really easy to simplify the interaction process. Because if they're already in there looking at their network support data, and now they can click in and analyze and explore outliers in the performance or where problem areas might be happening, it just makes it a much more intuitive process. So I think that's a critical differentiator. And then, I think just to augment what you said about being built for big data, it's not just big data, it's the variety of data. Increasingly people have real-time information, they have search data, they have NoSQL data, and frankly, we're the only tool that can connect to all of those and natively support them. And we're the only tool that allows you to do fusion, which means you can do analytics across those different models. And so a set of very powerful differentiators. All right, we're up at the top of the hour, and I know many of you have other things to do in your day, and so we thank you so much for attending. We are going to stay on the line and continue to answer questions for as long as you'd like to, but as I mentioned at the beginning, we have recorded this, and we will be making the recording available to you in a couple of days. You don't have to do anything, we'll just email an update out to you with that information. So if you want to go back and watch one of the demos again, or perhaps share the webcast with some of your colleagues, I think it might be helpful for them. We'll be making that available to you in a couple of days. Now, there was a couple of other specific questions here, Russ, I wanted to get to. This one is sort of thinking about, sort of connection strategy. It's about, would we ever support connecting to a graph database like Neo4j or OrientDB? And, I know we don't have any specific smart connectors directly to those, but I do think potentially with HANA and some other solutions, there is the ability to leverage graph technology. What's your position on that?
Absolutely. The answer is yes. We do want to support those. And in fact, early on, we built some Graph Lab connectors where we could visualize data from those databases. As customers present those requirements, we look forward to building connectors to support those. But we had some cool demos around the use of Neo4j and Graph Lab. And like you said, Nick, too, the MPP databases, those are important to us, too. In fact, we have a connector in SAP. We're working on one with Teradata, so we can support a broader range of data sets that we just showed here. So, and if there's something that you're looking for that we can't, or that you don't see, let us know, and we probably have it in the works or something that we can build for you as well.
And just a preview for in our product roadmap, the ability to support a broad variety of data sources is critically important. And many organizations have unique or custom data sources that, most vendors might never get around to supporting. And just as we have a programmable API for real-time data streams into Zoomdata, we're working on making available a custom data connector that you can use to connect Zoomdata to any backend data source that you want. And so just a sneak preview into our product roadmap, that ability to make it really easy for you to connect to any sort of data you want is going to be expanded as we go down the road. Here's a fairly, again, getting into the guts of the product. When you think about calculation engine, Russ, so for example, with your Fusion example where you were showing the percent sold, does Zoomdata break up the calculation into separate queries for the different data sets, or does it try to get to all of the data and then aggregate it? For example, is it a select sum from Mongo and a select sum from Cloudera, or do we pull all the results back into Spark and do it there?
We pull the data back into Spark and do it from there.
Okay, that's great. Now that we've mentioned the roadmap, there's a question on what's our roadmap regarding the Vertica connector.
Something that we've tested out as well. And again, if you have or need a requirement, please reach out to us at Russ at Zoomdata or Nick at Zoomdata. We'd love to learn more about that use case. But Vertica is in that MPP class. That's one that we would support.
And a little bit further on that, as I mentioned, the ability to develop these custom connectors is something that we use internally, and we are going to make that available to our customers in a future release. But right now, we do a number of connector projects with customers that may not be in our generally supported release, but we're working on our customers with them in a field trial situation. So there is a lot we can do there. For every customer, there's always a question about a particular connector, and so that's a great conversation to have directly with us. Feel free to email Russ or I directly, and we can talk about specifically what you're trying to do. I'm just browsing through the other questions. I think we've covered most of the questions that have come in from the audience. So I'll ask we still have a number of attendees. If you have any other questions you'd like to lob in to Russ and I, we'll stick around. Meanwhile, there's lots of things that you can do for a next step. Of course, you can reach out to us for specific questions, and our contact information is here on the screen. Our interactive demo environment, if you want to go in and play around with some of those demos that Russ was showing you, if you go to our website and go to the demo and just sign in, you'll find that billion row demo, the search demo, the real-time sales demo, and dozens of other interactive examples. And you don't have to do any setup or preparation. You can just go in and start playing around with those and really get a sense of what it's like to interact with the tool. And then if you want to actually do a trial, you've got a couple of options. If you want to sign up for a free trial in the cloud, you can go through and, for example, sign up for the Azure 30-day free trial. That will spin up automatically. You don't have to do any real installation or configuration. But if you really want to test out Zoomdata in your own IT environment, you can download the product. There's a couple of different options there. The Docker container. What else do we have, Russ, for download? You can install it in your own environment. You can try connecting it to your own data sources, and we'd be happy to help you as you go through that trial program. Yeah. So here's the page where you can choose which evaluation you'd like to try out.
And then here's the demo page. Isn't it highlighted too? The demos that we walk through, just click on this and you'll be able to view them. And the listed demo that we highlighted here is available there for review.
Well, all right. Well, Russ, let me thank you again for your time this morning, and all of the remaining audience members. Thank you so much for spending the past hour with us. We hope we were able to show you a lot of capabilities that could meet your requirements, and we're happy to follow up offline and help you explore Zoomdata further. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, so I just shut this down.